Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Overcoming the Podcast. Today, I have a special guest with me, and I am excited to introduce her in just a moment. We are going to dive into some of the overcoming journey regarding health and trauma and just holistic wellness altogether. She has a spectacular story, and I'm excited to have her on today. So, I have Beth Deeren with me, and she has her own business right now that she's going to it's shifted a little bit, so I'm going to let her kind of share the story with you. But we connect on quite a few ways, and like the woo-woo spiritual holistic side of things, on more of like the science story, on the health stories. And I think this is going to be a really, really great interview. So Beth, do you want to take it away and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. It's an honor, Taylor, and I'm excited to be here today. So I am Beth Deeren. I am now a functional medicine practitioner, but I wasn't always. Within the last couple years, as Taylor kind of alluded to, I've had a little bit of a major shift in my career prior to June 1st of this year. You know, there's nothing little about it. Let's not even sugarcoat it.
No.
I blew up my entire life, if we're being honest. So prior to June 1st of this year, I was a facility owner. I owned frontline residential care facilities and adult foster care homes. And through the pandemic, and I'll touch more on this during my story, but through the pandemic, I realized I wasn't living a life that was in alignment for me, nor was I in a job that was healthy for me. I suffered a lot of burnout. So it was during the pandemic that I made the decision to go back to school, bridge over as a functional medicine practitioner, and bet on myself, go into business for myself and truly pursue my passion. So it's been a wild ride, but I'm excited to be here. And honestly, the only thing I have to say about it is I wish I would have started sooner, because it feels really good to come home to yourself and what you're meant to do.
Yes. And I relate to that so much. I can't even tell you how many times I've been like, you know what, I'm just going to walk away from this traditional thing. And 2 years ago, I started this platform, and we've just slowly been rolling out more things. And it is my passion and my life's purpose and my work. It's like soul work, and I know you get that. So, okay. So I'm excited to dive in. So podcast, we're talking heavily about overcoming. And I know you have one heck of a story. Can you kind of paint the picture of what overcoming has been like in your life?
So for me, overcoming involved losing absolutely everything I knew. It involved redefining every single relationship as I knew it. And they say, as you grow, you're going to outgrow people in your life.
Oh, yeah.
Someone told me the magnitude that would happen on my healing journey prior to starting my healing journey. I don't know if I would be here today. Because it's through redefining those relationships that has been one of the most painful things I have gone through, but it's also been one of the most eye-opening, because it's really hard when you realize your own family has demons of their own and they don't necessarily have your back in the way that you need them to. So that's been eye-opening. But I'd say the biggest thing about overcoming is coming home to myself, choosing myself for the first time, and just opening my eyes. It is hard to go through, but once you're able to show up with authenticity and vulnerability, no one can take that away from you.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And the moment that you say, I'm choosing me, is when everything in the universe conspires for you. However, it can feel like everything is against you in that moment. And one of the things that I talk about a lot on my page, because I have definitely been experiencing it, is once you get aligned with yourself, everything in your life that is not aligned feels that much more out of place until you finally do something about it. And then it's this almost like barren period where you're just trusting in yourself, and you're actually kind of feeling good while you're watching your life completely crumble around you.
Yeah. You just described the last 18 months of my life, quite honestly. There's these moments of, am I insane for doing what I'm doing? Am I good? One of the most defining things that really made me question myself was those relationships I mentioned before that were redefined, I lost a lot of very close friendships to me. People I truly thought were like family that would be in my life forever. And it's painful to hear you've changed, like it's a bad thing when you know you were toxic before, you were not true to yourself before, and you were an unhealthy version of yourself. It's really hard to not question a little bit. I'd be lying if I said I didn't question, am I doing the right thing? Probably weekly, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
It's hard when you don't have the approval of those you've had your whole life. And bottom line is you don't need it, but there's not enough people out there sharing their true story so that those of us can look at it as a survival guide where while we're walking it. Sorry, words got a little hard there.
Oh, you're fine. That I can't even tell you how many times I've tripped over words, especially when emotions are involved. Don't worry. This podcast is used to it. I have disclaimers all in my very first episode. I'm like, we're going to go on squirrel tangents. We're going to mess up things. We're humans. We're messy humans. It's all good. We just keep going. I love it.
I love it. You can't expect perfect around here.
No. And here's the thing. It's like when I'm a little tangent here, when things are too curated, you can tell. And I think you lose that authenticity and you lose what's really connection. Connection is what grounds everything and drives us in should be business, with relationships, with our authentic self. Like connection is the root of everything. Connection is healing. There's like research that's like, that's where you have to start. That's before any therapist, anything needs to make any kind of move forward. You have to have that connection. And I love that you show up as your authentic self. And I think that's one of the things that drew me to you is because you are your authentic self, you can connect authentically with other people and hold space for them to do the same. And I just love that. So can you take us back, like paint this picture? When did you know this shift needed to happen? Like what led to this for you?
So looking back just a little on my backstory in my childhood, had prior to probably 2019, had you asked me about my childhood, I would have told you I was privileged. I come from a wealthy family. I come from an esteemed family.
Yeah.
So my only trauma I thought I had as a child was witnessing my father have a heart attack. He actually passed away in front of me, but was resuscitated. So that and its aftermaths were very traumatic. He went through a lot of emotional turmoil and trauma himself as a result, and it brought up some wounds for him because he had a near-death experience. So I always kind of had a familiarity with trauma my whole life, but it wasn't until I was probably in high school that I started knowing something needs to change. There were certain members of my family that would make me feel deeply uncomfortable around them, that would deny my truth, that I had to essentially be a different person around the majority of my family. And that wasn't right. That always in my heart and soul felt so wrong that I shouldn't have to fake who I am. These people are my family. They're supposed to love me no matter what, right? So why am I showing up as a fake version of myself?
Yeah.
So that was probably my first inkling. I really didn't dive into it further until my wedding. So during our wedding, my grandfather was a minister for 77 years and a very conservative religion of the Lutheran, under the Lutheran umbrella. We'll just leave it at that. So during my wedding, I didn't have any say in my vows, in the order of service. I was actually blindsided during my own ceremony by a different ceremony than I consented to. So that was fun. That was a major eye opener. Right around the time my husband and I got married, a lot of implosions within my mother's side of the family happened. And then, it kind of got swept under the rug. We all moved on. It was just weddings and big life events create drama. We never really thought anything of it. But then fast forward to 2019, I got sick. And between 2019 and now, I knew something had to change. And that was the trajectory that started the change of everything. I'll elaborate a little more on that illness if you'd like me to. So
yeah, go for it.
In 2019, I came down with respiratory failure, second-degree respiratory failure that led to ARDS. I came home from getting my hair done on a Saturday, told my husband, I don't feel good. I'm going to go lay down. Next thing I know, I was being admitted to ICU the following Wednesday. Like I went
Wow.
downhill very quickly. It was COVID-like in presentation. This was pre-COVID days. So
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah.
Not here to, make any judgments.
Yeah.
But it was during that time in ICU that I had a lot of time to reflect. I spent 14 days fighting for my life flat on my back. And I heard that Steve Jobs quote during my time in the hospital, like scrolling Facebook or whatever. If today were your last day, would you want to do what you're doing today? And I like sat up in my ICU bed and was like, F no. F no, I would not. And that was a big eye opener. So then after that, my recovery it was hard to say the least. I left the hospital unable to walk 20 feet. I had full body tendonitis and just a destroyed GI tract. I couldn't walk hardly because I was scared my tendons were going to rupture in my ankles. I had
Wow.
like massive complications from Levaquin, which is, I come to learn, blacklisted after the fact. So that's fun.
Yeah.
I was also left with just a destroyed GI tract. I would go 3 to 5 days, hardly able to keep down food. So I had a lot of healing that needed to be done, not just physically, but emotionally as well. The trauma that really shook me because there were points when I was actually scared to close my eyes. I was scared I wasn't going to wake up. So it was after that, maybe 2 weeks afterwards, I told my husband, this quote's really been playing in the back of my head. I don't want to go back to grad school. I was 3/4 of the way through my MBA. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't ever really want to work for a major hospital or do that. It doesn't feel like it's in alignment. And he's like, what do you want to do? I don't know, something in health, wellness, something like this happened for a reason in my life, something. I had absolutely no idea. And it was that event and that conversation with my husband that started the trajectory ultimately for me to bridge over to functional medicine school, for me to become a health and wellness coach, for me to launch my coaching practice and start the healing journey. It was truly through coaching, and my work as coaching. One of my job descriptions is to essentially lead by example. And a part of my daily metrics was personal development. So of course, being, I was never really so into the woo woo prior to this, but
I was going to ask, is this your spiritual awakening? Because it kind of seems like it.
Kind of, yes. I was always raised around it. My mom practiced Reiki and healing touch and a variety of modalities. So I was familiar with it, but not playing with oracle cards. Certainly didn't have like oracle cards sitting on my desk or anything like I do now.
Yep. And I think I have the same ones right next to me, actually. Pretty sure. Yeah. Yep.
That's funny.
It's fine. Totally normal. Just every day.
What was I just saying? So
spiritual awakening.
Spiritual. Yes. Okay. So it was during that time, like really tuning into PD and realizing, like learning my true Enneagram, getting into Myers-Briggs, literally just anything. If there's a personality test, I've taken it. I'm obsessed with it.
Yes.
I love talking with other people about theirs. And that was very eye-opening for me. Once I started healing, I was able to look at the people around me and realize how unhealed they were. And that is when everything truly started to shift. And I was like, I really need to make a change. And I knew it started with healing myself. And I just leapt. I leapt, and I hoped everyone else would follow suit. At one point, I remember having a very hard conversation with my husband that my biggest fear is that I'm going to outgrow you. Wow. And you're not going to heal along with me. And thankfully, we have come a long way and we are in a really good place right now. But we went through some hard times, because when I say I outgrew everyone in my life, I outgrew everyone in my life.
I understand that very much so. And, it's interesting because it's like this phenomenon. The more you heal, the more you step into your authentic self. That authenticity alone, it wakes people up and it makes them uncomfortable, because they can see, oh my gosh, one, you're not the same, and that you had a purpose where you were, right? Especially if you're in like a toxic family dynamic, you were easy to manipulate. You did what I wanted. You were always there for me. You didn't call me out on anything. I'm very comfortable being around you. But as you're healing and you're growing, you're calling them out. You're being you loudly. And sometimes even just that alone is a mirror for people. And when people have been hiding away from themselves, and you are that mirror that reflects what they're hiding, they can choose to just suppress that. They can choose to take that out on you. I know personally, I've been blamed. I was told that I was getting worse, that therapy was making me judgmental, that therapy was making me more dramatic, that I was just rude to people because I was assertive, that, you know, instead of just being manipulated and making myself small, being my true self, that I was worse, and everyone sees it. And no, you just have a problem. You didn't really have trauma. All of these things, anything that they could put on as an excuse to not see the reflection. And especially when you're also saying, like, you're being yourself, this is your reflection of, this is my true self. And like here, especially in intimate relationships, it's really interesting to me that you said that you had a conversation, you were telling your husband you were afraid you were going to outgrow him. I was in a serious relationship at the time, and I was telling everyone else, I was like, I'm afraid to do too much work on myself because I'm afraid that I'm going to outgrow him and leave him behind. I did. So I'm glad you guys were able to grow together. But you know, that should have been my sign right there. Like, oh, if I'm not willing to tell him, and I'm not willing to like work with him, and I knew he wasn't going to, I knew he wasn't capable of it where he was. But I loved him and I cared about him. And eventually I had to choose myself. So I'm very glad that you at least had one person who has been with you, because I know how hard it can be when you let absolutely everything go. Doesn't make that just having your husband there doesn't mean that any of the other losses are not still significant. I'm just glad you had at least one person. That just makes my heart happy.
No, it truly, he was my rock through a lot of it. And it got to a point where, I mean, I was scared. Without getting into too much personal detail, because it's not my story to tell, his family has its issues of his own. And he was not raised with a high level of emotional intelligence, or in a family that valued things like personal development, working on yourself, becoming a better person. So I was really scared that he'd have that kind of masculine view toward things like, oh, I don't need that. I don't want PD. I'm fine. I'm perfect. And thankfully he was open to realizing, no, I'm not perfect. And I mean, we've had to have the hard conversations. There's things he's done that have hurt me deeply. There's things I've done that have hurt him deeply. But through that, we were able to grow stronger together. And we're coming up on our 6th wedding anniversary and 11 years together. So truly, we grew up together. We absolutely grew up together. And had we not had that time invested these last 2 years, we would have absolutely divorced over it. Absolutely. I mean, it was truly knowing each other and seeing each other at rock bottom that allowed us to support each other through this, because it wasn't just him supporting me. It was me having to essentially like reassure him, I'm here, I'm staying. You know, this is our vision for both of us.
And it's hard too when there's so much change at once and you're like, oh my gosh, and now the relationship is being tested. And now we have all of these other things, like my family. I can't even think about what's going on with that. You know what I mean? And you're also changing your life and your work at the same time. That's just amazing.
I actually heard a excerpt from either a podcast or an audiobook. I believe it was Jenna Kushner. And she basically said, like, someone close to her in her life had died. And she's like, death changes everything. But what it doesn't prepare you for is losing everyone. Like, that hit me so hard. The true, you know, now that I think about it, one of the true trajectories in my story that really changed things was the passing of my grandparents. That truly changed the dynamic in my family and gave me, through a traumatic situation, gave me the opportunity to step into my power, honestly. And it was through that I ended up cutting off ties with the majority of my mother's side of the family, who are still very conservative, practicing Lutherans to this day. The branch of the church they're in is borderline cult-like, with very, very conservative viewpoints. And things like, you know, blood is thicker than water were always held over my head as ways to manipulate me, honestly. But it was when my grandparents passed away. One passed in 2020 and the next passed in 2021. And I was actually not invited to one of the funerals. So that was hard, to say the least. And in confronting family members afterwards, I really saw people's true colors. And that was truly one of the most eye-opening things. Now, I was already on a healing journey at this point in time and had already really limited contact with these individuals. So it doesn't stand out as like this pivotal moment. But now
Yeah.
that we're discussing it, that truly was one of the moments that changed everything, because I realized people close to me were not necessarily who I thought they were. They had
Mhm.
been wearing a mask their entire life in front of me. And
Yeah.
people, including my own mother,
Yeah.
like turned on me. And when I wasn't easy to manipulate anymore, and when I found my voice,
Yep.
those people no longer wanted to be around me.
Yep.
And that right there is one of the most heartbreaking things that any trauma survivor can overcome and go through.
Yep.
So I felt it was important to actually come back and touch on that, because
Yeah.
now that I've kind of healed through it, I don't think of it as one of the more pivotal parts of my story.
Mhm.
But when people are in it, it feels like you're not going to survive it. It
Oh,
feels like you
yeah.
have nothing. It feels like you're alone. And it was truly around that time that I hit my rock bottom. I was going through burnout, running a healthcare facility, just unimaginable working conditions and trauma. And my own family tells me, "You're paranoid. You need therapy."
Hmm.
Like, well, I know I need therapy. I'm in the front lines of a pandemic. We're not going to be okay after this. Like, we know that.
Yeah.
But to just shame me like that when I had actually reached out with vulnerability over
Mhm.
a fairly minor issue,
Yeah.
that really opened my eyes. And it got to a point where I finally had to cut off contact with most of them.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I relate to that too, that it's like the more you step into yourself, the least that they accept you, right? Or the less that they accept you. And it's such an interesting thing for me because for me, I very clearly saw one parent as my abuser my entire life, and the other one was the good parent, right?
Mhm.
And I clung to my mom, and I slowly started realizing that I would say probably around like now that I look back, people saw it for a long time, but I didn't want to because that would really completely turned my life upside down and what I always thought and who I thought was safe. And I compared my mom and I to like the Gilmore Girls, like we're best friends. And like it just was not true. And on my end, I had those feelings. I had that, but it was very one sided. And I remember just in my early 20s, I started connecting to these older women, I'm like middle aged, and who just saw me and loved me and praised me. And I was working in special education and they were teachers and they're just like, you are so smart. You are so pretty. You're going to change the world, like always cheering me on. And like, I think that was the first time that I really thought I could do anything. And it didn't come from my family. My family was the one who was trying to say, you can't do this. No, it was the little tiny jabs, but I realized how much that impacted me because I
Mhm.
consistently made myself small. And anytime I made a little mistake, which is because we're human, I was terrified to bring anything to my family. I had to be perfect, right? It was this perfectionism tendency. I was the one like if I'm doing things that look right for you, that make you look good, then we're good. If I don't, then you're sitting there criticizing me and pushing me down. And, and it was a really hard awakening for me. And I would say that it was a slow burn to be able to fully let them go because that now that I'm realizing when I realized some dysfunction was my early 20s and I didn't let my mom go no contact until I was 28, beginning of 28, right before my end of my 27th. And I'm 29 and a half now. That's weird. Um, so it's been a bit. And I had a period of no contact and then a period of when I was together and like seeing if we could repair things. It wasn't possible. And now we're back to full no contact. And I mean, none of my family, I don't speak to any of them, not a single one. And I it allowed me to take the steps forward in my business that I have, because they were
Mhm.
holding me back in that way, in all of the ways, and show up as my authentic self and be confident in my body. And they're always commenting on my body, or, oh, this, or, oh, that, or, or my anxiety. Why can't you just get over your PTSD? You're making yourself be triggered every year on a huge trauma anniversary. You just need to stop it. You're being dramatic. You're trying to get attention at this point. I'm like, what? You think this is, yeah. So just, I'm like, this is what we want attention over. Right. And so
Right.
now I live as my authentic self 100% of the time, because I don't have even the tiniest voice telling me that I'm not enough, because I've
Mhm.
removed myself from that. Now, do I have to work through that when healing? Like you said, it's coming home to yourself. Absolutely. You're going to, like, you have to reparent yourself, and you have to figure out who you are outside of what you've always known, especially when you figure out what you've always known wasn't real.
Right.
And that's just like the biggest eye opener ever.
No, it was very similar for me. At points, I didn't know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I had been wearing this mask my whole life. And my relationship with my mother was, well, I'm still in contact with her, was very similar to yours.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I don't remember ever being told I was beautiful. I remember being told I looked, quite honestly, like a whore. I
Yeah.
was wearing too much makeup. My clothes were too tight. I was showing too much skin, or this or that. That's those very conservative views. And I'm like, but I'm comfortable in my body. I feel fine wearing this, spaghetti strap tank top, or whatever it may be, these simple little things. It's not like
Yeah.
I was like 14 and running around in thong bikinis on the beach. Like,
Yeah.
I was wearing what my peers were wearing and getting shamed for it.
Mm.
I was in dance, and the stage makeup, I would be told, oh, that's too much. Um, I
You're on
don't
his
exactly
stage
get a
so far
choice on
away.
this. Right. I don't exactly get a choice on this, mom.
Oh
Like,
my gosh.
thank you. But I think I was in probably maybe the 5th or 6th grade. And I'll never forget this. My friend Erin, one of my best friends growing up, said to me, she's like, my mom said something to me in the car the other day, and it made me feel pretty uncomfortable. She looked at me and she said, "You're beautiful." And it made me feel not so good. I like kind of was like, oh, well, that's really awesome. Your mom's saying like awesome things to you.
Mm-hmm.
But it also made me feel awkward and uncomfortable. And I didn't know why. I just knew in my gut it didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And looking back, that's because I never heard those words. But I don't think my mother ever heard she was beautiful or complimented herself or
Oh
tried to
yeah.
that side of herself. So in a way, I can't fault her for it. But so much more makes sense now as an adult in my life, with self-esteem issues and physical self-esteem issues, being that I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't affirmed and I wasn't even allowed to be my authentic self. I was literally
Yeah.
shamed for it. And just the irony and the similarities in our stories, it's crazy
Yeah.
how much. I've actually never met somebody until you that has as quite as many similarities in our story.
Welcome.
That's a good thing.
It just means we connect. We get it. It's like,
Right.
I hear that a lot too. Cause I feel like my story, I have a bunch of different like nuances that connect people in different ways. I've almost felt like my story, and up until recently, I was like, there's one type of trauma that I really haven't dealt with. And then recently I did. And I was like, oh, okay. And it almost feels like I have to experience things firsthand to be able to have the intensity to be able to like share so passionately. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying I invited any of that, but I feel like part of my journey and part of my story is like the personal overcoming myself. And then I share that to be able to help others. And like that's the connection piece sometimes. So yeah, I'm glad we connect. Also not because it's not fun, but you know what I mean. So
Mutual feeling.
exactly. But we get each other, therefore, no filter. And I'm sure people listening are like, oh, yeah, same. Because here's the thing, people don't talk about this stuff and like the nuances. And there's another episode, and I'm not sure if it's going to be before or after. We're literally just discussing the mother wound,
Mm.
because my mom is colder. My mom is a Capricorn, and they typically don't have a lot of emotions, anyways. But also, in January, my entire world blew apart to see my entire family differently, seeing patterns of generational trauma and how the women on the side of the family protected abusers and how the men were always abusive. And they were raised to just be quiet, get over it. It's not a big deal. This is how it works. And you're supposed to love and support and defend the abusers anyway. And it's not abuse. It's fine. They're family. We just get over it. It's no big deal.
Right.
And I'm like, well, no wonder my mom is that way. However, she's not willing to change and she's not willing to look, because when I put up the mirror and I say, hey, this is going on in my life and this is traumatic for me, she's been through similar things that she would have to look at and be like, oh, that could be trauma. No, I'm good.
Mhm.
But so she's been, and I think similar to you, like, it's not that I can't fault my mom. There is accountability in how she showed up, right?
Mhm.
I recognize that she had it hard. I recognize that her husband was abusive. I recognize that, she shared early in life that she had some issues herself and past traumas that she didn't want to deal with. She didn't do therapy. She refused. And also that her mom was the one who worked and took care of everything and wasn't home as much because she was working. And so my mom just learned to be independent and the doer and not the emotional connector. And so me being this over the top, big dynamic person, we're talking spiritual stuff like Pisces, INFP, like all of the the dreamer and everything and super emotional. And there is this woman who is like, holy crap, you're a lot. Like, I live in a very small window here where I'm calm and then I'm maybe a little bit goofy sometimes, but that's sometimes too much emotion. And then when I'm angry, I'm just really quiet. And that's about all she has is this. And meanwhile, I'm like, woohoo! And she cannot stand it. And so we had a lot of hard time emotionally connecting. And I don't feel like I got my emotional needs met in my childhood. And that's why I sought outside of the family to like a family friend dynamic that she grew up with to search for that, because they told me they saw the dysfunction on both sides of the family and saw me for who I was and was there to support me, which was great until it wasn't. And they were also toxic because, patterns, they attract each other. However, it was very interesting to me because on my mom's side of the family, it was very covert and it was very hard to see.
Mhm.
And it's been set up generations like that. And I think there are certain like family cultures and family dynamics where it's just normalized abuse and they don't want to recognize it as toxic or abusive or anything like that. And so there's maladaptive coping patterns that they keep to themselves within their family, and then they repeat and they repeat until there's someone like you and I who goes, I'm going to be myself. You don't control me. No, like cycle break. No. And then they get mad. Mad. Whew.
Oh yeah. The similarities are just eerie. But I came from a family that, it was very covert. It was, most people that know them still to this day would label me a liar and tell me, no, they're good people. Well, yeah, to you.
Exactly.
You don't have to live in it. You didn't have to
Same.
come home with it at night. You've never confronted somebody with like this really hurtful thing you need closure on and been ignored. At one point, I became pregnant with my daughter out of wedlock. And my grandparents decided to come to my house and sit me down and just emotionally destroy me. They ordered me to marry her father, who was abusive at the time. I was like 3 months, maybe 6 months pregnant, and we had been dating for a few months prior. So no, by no means were we considering marriage at this point. He was a diagnosed narcissist who was emotionally and physically abusive. And they ordered me to marry him. They did not care that I said, we have some issues. I was general. We have some issues. Yeah. Basically, no, you need to get married or you will shame the family. Huh. What?
What year is this?
What? Oh. Like my daughter was born in 2009. So this wasn't 1942 here.
Yeah, I know.
After that, I really cut ties with most of my mother's extended family. I was like, I'm not going to be abused in my own home. They
No.
have no right. Like, yes, I'm pregnant, but they have no right to have an opinion on that. I didn't ask. I didn't consent.
Yeah.
I don't care what they think.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what I need to do. And it's abusive and traumatic for them to come into my home and tell me otherwise and order me to do things and all of this. And that's when I truly started realizing like something is wrong, but it's so covert. Even recently, I confronted my mother about that traumatic event and the abuse. And when I mentioned that, like, I talk about it openly, she lost it, absolutely lost it.
Yeah.
And the most hurtful thing, I mean, so if she knew this was going out in a podcast, like her head would probably explode.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's my truth.
Yep.
And she actually went as far as to tell me the words, "You can't slander my father like that." Well, then he shouldn't have behaved like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, not sorry. Like, I'm not protecting him. I don't owe him anything. I will also go out to say, you know, how he's an amazing person and a wonderful person, because nobody's all bad.
Yeah.
Nobody's all bad.
Yeah.
But I will not for one second sugarcoat it and say that he was this amazing man who didn't cause me immense trauma and immense pain.
Yeah.
Because that's not being true to myself.
Yeah. And
That's
when you're already going through
my
abuse,
emotion. Right.
oh, you're
Why would I
literally
respect
sitting there stuck in abuse, already freaking out about the fact that you just found out you're pregnant and your family is trying to tie you to this person for the rest of your life, not caring about your feelings or your safety. Oh.
And to this day, not one member of my family, I brought the abuse up to an aunt of mine, and she basically was like, "Yeah, that's not abuse. You're lying." Accused me of essentially claiming abuse to like fit my story, or like I had something to gain here. Like I was intentionally manipulating the situation. Yeah. Mind you, this time, like I'm in a pandemic running facilities. I had 0 minutes to be manufacturing drama in my life. Right. I was trying to survive. I was, you know, working nursing shifts in the front lines and really just in a bad place. And unfortunately, I thought that I could be vulnerable enough to this person because I saw some similarities in our personalities. And I was called a liar. I was basically told no, but it was very eye-opening because this woman after the fact told me that I attacked her. And that actually makes me laugh because I was not mean. I was not rude. And I didn't say anything about her. I shared my truth and it made her feel attacked. Because there were some similarities in our stories.
There's and the mirror.
Yes, it was the mirror. And I honestly feel deeply, deeply bad for these people. I have a lot of sympathy for them because they're deeply broken and hurting people, and they can't see the pattern. They can't see the mirror enough to heal themselves. They are denying their trauma for just generations and generations. That when I say, oh, this was traumatic and abusive for me, that's got to be massively triggering because they never had permission to say, oh, that's abusive. Oh, this or that. I know for a fact family members of mine have made decisions they more than likely regret, whether to keep pregnancies or not. And when I said I was keeping mine, nobody's going to tell me what I'm going to do with my body. That was triggering to a lot of people who didn't feel permission to make that same choice. And it was through that, yeah, I lost everyone. And some of the family, after I intentionally blocked them, has gone as far. And I think, I just assume it's these people, as to create fake profiles and still try to get through to me and bully. And all I have to say to that is like, hurt people hurt people. I just feel bad for you at this point, honestly, because why are you wasting your time tearing people down when you could be building yourself up? You could be healing yourself. You could be overcoming your own stuff. But instead, you're going to project it on me. Okay. It was very hard to accept that, though. It was very, very hard to accept that. And it took a lot of personal growth work and truly doing the work internally to turn my mess into my message, to get to a point where I was able to share that and to be honest with that, because it was so stigmatized, and to just literally be told you're not allowed to share.
And also like,
But I'm
so
an
I
adult.
resonate with this too, because like I have been no contact with my biological father since I was like 21, 22. And he still shows up on my page, showed up with their name watching, and then attempted to comment something. Was like, you have no right. Meanwhile, feeding stuff to my mom that I need to be careful what I'm saying. And, I'm painting the wrong picture and the wrong abuser. And how dare I? And I need to be careful. And this person who puts lawsuits on people and I'm just like, why? What happened to you that you have decided I'm like, you could just act like this doesn't exist. If this is so shameful to you that I am sharing your secrets, okay, why would you go out of your way to bring them to everyone's attention and try and prove them the opposite? Why wouldn't you just ignore it? Because you're a miserable person and you're attempting to get power over someone you no longer have power over anymore. And I think that's what fed them for so long. My biological father pulled me aside in front of cops. It was like, can I say bye to my daughter for a minute? When I was leaving based on something that happened at his house. I was going in the back of a cop car, or I was going to my mom's house, or going to jail. And because he framed me for something. Anyways, so he was like, can I talk to her? And I was like, they were like, oh yeah. And so he comes and he gives me this big hug, and he just has this big smile on his face, and he whispers in my ear, he's like, I'm gonna make your life a living hell. Pushes me back and goes, bye, sweetie, love you. And I just was like, what in the world?
Manipulative monster.
And that happened when I think was 18. I'm 29. He still shows up. He's stalked me. He's shown up at places that I worked, video camera, and like I had to be snuck out. Like I worked in a movie theater. He was in the line over. He would like demand to show up at places that I worked, try and ask for me if he knew I would be there, Google my name, like just creepy stuff. And like, I just, I resonate with you. It's like, I would talk to my therapist about this, and I'm like, I just don't know why they care so much to watch and to attempt to like manipulate me or control me or stop me or what. I'm like, you can't. I'm not scared of you anymore. Obviously, I'm talking about actively what you're doing on the internet. Like, you don't, like the shame spirals that used to keep me in, the beliefs that you had me have about myself kept me small, kept me doing, and I was under your control for a long time, but I'm not now. When are you going to give that up? And it's infuriating. And it's like, to me, like, and I know you don't know who the fake accounts are for sure, but I'm sure
I have a good idea. And that's the hard thing. Just yesterday, I actually received a message, and I had to lean into some of the ladies on my coaching team, which so thankful for those ladies, because they truly got me into a different headspace yesterday. Yeah. But I received this message telling me that I'm orthorexic. I'm like, something about me taking creatine now. And I'm taking creatine. I'm training for a bikini figure competition. I did my first one this last July, and my goal is now to go back and take the finals next year. Just threw that into the universe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am training. I am taking creatine. I am taking my health and fitness very seriously. What's it to you? I'm not asking you to put it in your body. Like, what is it to you? And it was just this fake account, user 666 or whatever. No picture, no followers.
Yeah.
Like, okay. You literally created this account just to send me this mean message. You're taking time out of your day to do this. But then at the end, it was the line, get a real job. That I was like, how many times while I was in the height of the pandemic, I had family members of mine honestly bullying me and like saying, don't ever quit your real job, when I was very loudly talking about wanting to quit my job, wanting to pursue coaching, wanting to pursue functional med full time. And honestly, I might have taken the leap a lot sooner if I didn't have people with no business telling me what to do in my ear, telling me it was dumb to quit my real job, because where would my mental health be had I walked a little sooner? And I will always wonder that to some extent, because there's scars that will run deep. But yeah, like you said, I would never publicly accuse anybody of anything, but I know my core, I
Yeah.
know because of the similarities, I can feel that energy come through in the messages. And it's like,
Yep.
you're literally just picking me apart over anything I'm saying and doing when it
Mhm.
has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
A stranger on the internet simply wouldn't care that much.
No.
They would keep scrolling because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter, what I choose to eat, how I choose to exercise, what I choose to put in my body via supplements. I'm sharing that for people that are interested. The majority of people that are not interested, if they're healthy, they know how to scroll on by.
Yeah.
So when people actually, I call them keyboard warriors,
Yep.
but when they take the time to do that, I just have a lot of sympathy for them at this point now, because it's
Yeah.
like, you're creating accounts, you're running around and doing this. What does that say about you?
A
I'm going to share
lot of,
publicly, and
yeah.
I'm going to talk openly about it because it's not embarrassing to me,
Nope.
but maybe you should be embarrassed.
Yeah. And they aren't usually.
No.
But, I used to talk to my therapist about this. I'm like, why? Why? Like, I can't even begin to think about like what is in this person's brain that they just cannot give up, that they have to feel like they have to try and bring someone down. I'm like, I just don't understand. My therapist is like, you're not going to be able to understand because you could never do something like that because your heart is not like that and never has been. And I was like, oh, she's like, but you used to be controlled by that person. You used to be what they needed you to be a good reflection of them. And now you're being the opposite. And so when people are that aligned to their image, they're going to attack anyone who tries to dismantle that, even though that's not what I'm doing. I'm literally doing this for survivors. And I know you do this for your community. Like, I'm sure there are family members listening. Great. Listen, enjoy.
Hi, guys.
This is
Hope
what
you're having a great day.
I've learned, and I don't really care anymore. Right. And hopefully one day you all get healing, but it's just like, when you are the cycle breaker and you are the one to do things differently, even in the like spiritual or, going into more functional medicine, that's not a real job, me being an entrepreneur, doing things differently. And even though I have this doctorate degree and I could be working in a hospital right now, I could be doing the typical job and be making very decent money. It's not my passion. And I think there's so many people who just don't understand that. And I appreciate that you get that, because again, it comes back down to the authenticity piece. The more you align with yourself, the more deeply uncomfortable it is when the other things do not align and they're in your life.
Oh, absolutely. One huge piece for me overcoming that, because I spent a long time stuck in the not understanding, in the why is this happening to me? But, but she's my mother, but it's my best friend, but it's my in-laws, but we were close once. Like,
yeah,
I got so stuck up in that. And the biggest thing that allowed me to overcome that is coming to terms with the fact that some people are just better people than others. And I do not say that to brag about myself, because I'm far from perfect. I'm not a good person in some ways, as I'm sure are you, but I'm trying to work on those ways and I'm at least aware of them.
Yeah.
And that to me is huge. But when people are not even acknowledging the ways they can grow, that tells you a lot right there.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you just have to accept that some people are morally better people than others. They are, pure and simple. And for me, that was a very, very hard thing to come to terms with, because I felt almost like I was bragging or drawing attention to myself, or being maybe egotistical in saying like, I'm a better person than them. I would never hurt somebody like that. I would never do that.
No.
But I truly cannot imagine going out of my way to cause emotional pain to another human being. And it's probably because I've been truly to the depths of rock bottom and back through that type of emotional pain inflicted by other people, that I could never do that.
Yeah, I know. I feel the exact same way. And it's like, at some point you have to celebrate yourself for that. And, I think the thing that helped me was non-attachment, that you can't control anything they do. And even though it could be triggering, even though there's so many potential rabbit holes that could go down, right? I could think of worst case scenario and panic. However, you can only control what you do. And at the end of the day, if you're proud of how you show up, if you're proud of how you're working on yourself, if you're proud of what you're saying and what you're doing, and that your actions and your words align and your intentions, and there is no malintent in your heart, that's enough.
I couldn't agree more. Perfectly
And
said.
it has to be enough, because you, anyone being surrounded by toxicity, you can't control them.
No.
It sucks, but
No.
I used to think that I could make them change. Like I could open their eyes, and especially my mom, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe when we're living together for this month after I like had this big thing, when I came back in January, I was like, maybe this will be like our opportunity to rekindle and reconnect and like get on the same page. And it went the exact opposite way. And I was just like, okay, that's the last thing that I needed to let go of. And it was really hard, but so necessary.
It comes to a point in that process, especially with close family members that are unhealed, where you have to choose yourself over choosing to repair your relationship with them. And that is the single most heartbreaking decision you will ever have to make. But when you overcome that and come out on the other side, that's when you come home to who you're meant to be. That's when you step into your authenticity. And that's when you start to truly feel at peace. Now, I would be absolutely lying if I said I didn't have hard days, if there weren't still times when I really struggle with the lack of support or the lack of relationships. But sometimes doors have to close so that other ones can open. And much like you, I had some very toxic energies in my life that were literally holding me back from being successful in my coaching business, in my business, and showing my face forward. Because, you just can't be on social media, attraction marketing, and talking to people when you're in a really dark place yourself and you're crying and you just don't have that energy and you feel completely alone. So I think it's important to share not just the overcoming part, but the rock bottom.
Oh yeah, that's part of the journey.
Because I feel like so many people are able to look at yourself as, you have a doctorate, you're successful. I am a functional med practitioner. I have multiple bachelor's degrees. I was a business owner. I'm still a multiple business owner. And they see that success, but they don't see what you had to go through to get there. They don't see what you had to do to be that person. And to me, it's selfish. It's absolutely selfish not to share the real, the raw, and the ugly. Because if one thing comes out of my negative experiences, I would love for them to be someone else's survival guide. So someone else can feel a little bit less alone than I did. Just a little bit. Because that loneliness is truly soul crushing.
It is. And, that's exactly why I created this community. Exactly that, you were silenced for so long that to the point where you didn't even realize what was going on till later. Right. And I know that I was threatened into silence, like death threats and things of that nature. And eventually I just had to be like, no, I am telling my story. I'm speaking up. I'm helping people. This is my passion. This is how I show up. And if you want to call me devil child because I'm into tarot and spirituality, go for it. It's funny to me because my family on that side wasn't even super like cultish Christian, but still had those beliefs that like Harry Potter was evil. I don't know. Anyway,
Very similar.
Very similar. Look at me now. You'd say I'm a witch. So it's fun. But which we know is just not how it works. But I find it really interesting that like we're so shaped by our families early on. And I think some of our paths really is with all of the disingenuine and toxic people and all of the things that have been around us trying to control us. The bravest act of rebellion, I say it all the time, is to reclaim yourself and take back your life. And I think sometimes that's a sole purpose in itself.
Yeah.
And you're like, why? I'm the person who always questions why. I believe that everything happens for a reason. I believe we have patterns. I know we have free will, but like, I'm always like, okay, how do I bring this into a purpose? How do I take this and what I've learned and bring this into something that might help someone else? Because that's just how my brain works too, right? And, it's like, sometimes I think that part of my purpose was really to break through from all of those things that were holding me back and recognizing that this idea of what you wanted family to be wasn't that. And it's hard, it's heavy, and I know that, but it's also important because I just became this beautiful fucking lotus. And I love it. And it's not to be conceited by any means. It's confident. And that's so different. And it's like my beauty, my inner and outer beauty does not take away from anyone else's. It doesn't mean that we are less than. We are also,
There's
you
room for
know?
everyone at the top. There's room
Exactly.
for all of us at the top. And
Exactly.
that's how I recruit in my business. That's
Yep.
the theme we have on our teams. Like
Yep.
there's always room at my table. I will never be the woman who makes someone else feel uncomfortable at my table. To circle
Exactly.
back for just a second,
Yeah.
I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said it's brave, because it's brave. So many survivors are stuck in this place where they fear giving themselves permission to step into their power, to be authentic, to be true to themselves. And I don't exactly know why. I know I went through this myself too. It comes from fear, but the bravest thing you can ever do is give yourself permission to heal and give yourself permission to step into your true power. Truly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
think like anyone listening to that, if there's one takeaway, give yourself permission to just start showing up as you in whatever small way you can, wherever you're at, because it's going to make a world of difference at the end of the day.
Yes.
And I wish I would have done it a heck of a lot sooner, because I dumbed down a lot of my potential without even realizing it, because I was told, things like tarot cards are evil.
Yep.
And yet traditional religion never spoke to me. Why can't we look at oracle cards as an extension of spirituality, not something other than? Because I connect a lot more with other modalities of spirituality, yet I'm still very Christian. So I think for everybody, it's coming to their own journey in that.
And everything, right? Like it's so interesting. And I'm going to wrap this up soon. I think this is like the perfect point, like we're getting to here. It's like there are going to always be these rules in society, in families. There's like the hidden rules, right? In occupational therapy, one of the things that we teach kiddos in social skills are these hidden rules, right? And maybe one of those is you don't interrupt the teacher and scream and jump and holler in the classroom, or when the teacher says work, you have to work, or there's these different things, like in certain environments it's okay to be this way, and it's just based on us observing and recognizing, right? It's like, oh well, we don't say this type of topic at the dinner table. Maybe it's not, we're going to bring out the rule book and blah blah blah, but you kind of learn in your family there's certain things that are okay and there's certain things that aren't. And certain things in the world, like as a woman, you don't criticize too much or go against authority too much, because then you'll be seen as bitchy, then you'll be seen as whatever else. Think of what happened to Taylor Swift, right? It's like it's interesting to me that like we try and follow society's rules so much at the point of losing ourselves in the process. And we don't need to do that anymore. You get to heal, you get to grow, you get to figure out where you fit. You get to figure out what people fit in your life. If it's not blood related family, it's not blood related family. Because guess what? You find those people, the more you're your authentic self and you're shining that light, you naturally attract those people who are on that level with you. And it's not like high school anymore. You're not just forced to be surrounded by anyone and everyone. You get to choose your people in adulthood. And I know there are periods, and I've actually, there are probably, teenagers listening where if you're not an adult yet and that's hard to do, but just know that like, that's something that you get to do. You're not a controlled child anymore. You don't have to follow mom and dad's rules. You don't have to sit there. You don't have to go to church on Sunday if you don't want to. You can still have your beliefs. You do what you want to do.
Right. And
you can choose your job.
Right. Don't be like me and wait till you're 30. Discover that, blow up your entire life and start over again, because it's a lot harder. My advice to anyone like in their early 20s, get it figured out now. Get it figured out how to be your authentic self now. Work through the trauma, because the longer you put it off, the harder it's going to be, because now you have this whole life with bills, with expenses, with properties you may own and things. And you realize they're not in alignment with you. I mean, on paper, I was making multiple six figures. I was successful. I had it all, but it was miserable.
Yep.
And the majority of people think I'm crazy for walking away from that,
Yep.
but I'm not. I don't feel crazy one bit. I feel crazy for not doing it sooner, crazy for staying in something that wasn't in true alignment.
Yep.
But it was because of those kind of behavior codes in society, in my family, in just my community growing up that I didn't believe I could, because
Yep.
no one ever really, I can't say that. My father always told me I could do anything I set my mind to. And that's a huge part of why I was able to blow up my life like I did.
Yep.
But it wasn't acceptable to do so.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't feel like you had permission. Here's the thing. You don't need anyone's permission. Give yourself the damn permission and take your
Yep.
power back before it's too late.
Yep.
Because life's short. Pure
Yep.
and simple, life is short.
Yep. And here's the thing, people following all these society rules or family rules or whatever, they're probably miserable.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Were you? I mean, yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Until I figured out where I was.
Right. We have to give ourselves permission to admit we're unhappy, to admit we want more.
Yep.
And that involves being brave. That involves saying, I don't really like my life. So I'm going to have to take responsibility for it. And that can be a really hard pill to swallow, especially when you start talking to your loved ones and they think you're crazy, or they tell you you've changed, like it's a bad thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you're proud of yourself. It's like, is that really so bad? Or does that really show that maybe you have some healing to do too?
Yep. 100%. And like at the end of the day, you are the only person guaranteed to be there for the rest of your life. So do right by that person.
Yeah. You've got to come home to yourself, pure and simple. It's a controversial opinion. I actually think that a lot of depression and anxiety is misdiagnosed as being surrounded by assholes, being out of alignment in your own life. Because, if you go on vacation and you're magically not depressed, that's not a diagnosable medical condition.
Yeah.
That means you need to fix, like, even from a healthcare practitioner standpoint, not medical advice, but I can very confidently say, if you go on vacation and your depression cures itself, you don't have legitimate depression. You're depressed by the circumstances in your life. And
it's your environment.
Too many of us are, because we aren't brave enough, and we don't give ourselves permission to step into our power and come home to who we're meant to be. I know I didn't for a lot of years. Even once I started my healing journey, I didn't fully for a while.
Yeah.
And it was once I did that I was able to truly discover happiness is in my control, and I'm in control of my life in all ways. So if it doesn't align, we're just not going to do that anymore. And it does make a lot of people angry, but it's worth it.
Exactly. And I think the first step too is like, if you're like, oh, I want to, but I don't know how to, it's the awareness. It's the tools. It's building awareness of what is going on, of, some little steps forward. And actually, one of the courses that I am working on will highly be working on that, because I think it is so, so important. And just knowing the little baby steps to take towards yourself, they add up. They really, really add up. So if you're like, I'm lost, I don't get it, like, make sure that you are on my email list, because if it's not out already by the time this airs, it will be soon. Because I find it so, so, so important. And like you said, people don't do this enough, but I think some of it comes down to courage, and yes, you have to be able to take that step. But I also think some of it comes down to not having the resources and not knowing what or how to start. And it's really important to reach out to the people either who have been there, or if there's a genuine support in your life. And, anything, if you're looking the healing journey, make sure you have the support that you want and you need forward, because you're going to need it. When you decide to make this shift, you need it.
I'm glad you brought up reaching out for help, because this is something I want to touch on really quick. If you ask for help and you do get less than desirable results, don't stop. Don't stop advocating for yourself.
Yeah.
There was a point in time when I knew I was struggling with burnout. I was struggling mentally. I just needed help navigating. I needed someone desperately to hold space for me and just talk through it with me. I was so lonely. I was so isolated. I didn't have anybody that understood me. And I had massive and major life decisions to make. And nobody would even have a cup of coffee with me over it. And it was one of the hardest things. I reached out to my own mother, multiple close friends, and was essentially ignored. I would hear a reply, 8 days later, 7 days later. I had a very close friend actually tell me she intentionally pulled away because my circumstance wasn't healthy. So that means I don't need friendship through it. That means I don't need support
Yeah.
through it. Like, so just to circle back on that, yes, ask for help, but don't stop asking for help.
And
Yes.
if you
Doesn't
don't get
go.
it, if you don't get it in your circle, go to professionals because they're not
Yes.
gonna put
Yes.
you down.
Your
Like,
family can't be expected to know how to solve you.
no.
And I mean, that's the thing is I wasn't going for these people saying, hey, fix me. Hey, like
Yeah.
diagnose me. Hey, any of this. I was
Yeah.
literally saying, I'm in the situation. Help me figure it out. Like, help me come to the answers. And those people were like, we don't know how to do that. We
Yeah.
can't. But again, my light was a mirror to them. And then they'd have to start working through their own stuff or maybe making their own decisions.
Mhm.
But that knocked me down for a long time. Like this mentality of, but I asked for help and I didn't get it. And I truly could not understand why. And it wasn't until several years later when I've healed a lot more that I'm able to look back and realize those people are hurting themselves. They're not capable of helping me because that would mean they'd have to stop lying to themselves.
Yep.
And that is really hard to come to terms with, but it's
Mhm.
also comforting at the same time because it makes me realize, hurt people hurt people.
Mhm.
It's not me that's the problem,
Mhm.
but you've got to have the courage to keep, therapy is the answer for some, other modalities are the answer for some.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be, you've got to find someone who can help you take that first step through it.
Mhm.
And we've got
Yeah.
people in our coaching team that
Yep.
they've leaned into coaching and they've worked through their trauma that way.
Yep.
You've got some amazing courses you offer.
Mhm.
Both of those would be great places to start, but you've got to start somewhere.
Yep.
And don't get discouraged.
With
Don't.
what aligns with you too, like what
Yeah.
feels right. If something like,
Yeah.
if it's baby steps, right? That's the whole journey is it's baby steps. And it doesn't matter how you start, just start, because what you'll find is once you start, you'll see what works for you and what doesn't. And I'm a firm believer in having a huge toolkit when it comes to your healing journey. I use all the modalities. I use Reiki. I have done inner child healing sessions. I have done therapy, different types of therapy, stress protocols, DBT, CBT, EMDR, like all of these things. And actually, I'm going to like break the internet for a second. So in in my certified trauma professional course, one thing they talk about is that there is inconsistent evidence that any specific modality is more beneficial than the other in healing trauma.
I've heard that.
That really it's the relationship and the feeling of safety and security.
And community. It comes back to community.
Yep.
There is a PubMed article that touches on this. I probably won't be able to find it if my life depends on it, but exactly what you said. Community, inclusivity. We all need people. And it's that isolation that can make you feel crazy.
Yep. And figure out what that is for you. Figure out where your stuff is, where, what works.
Give yourself permission to change course. Maybe therapy worked for a while and it doesn't bring you joy anymore. It's not that therapy always brings you joy. You've got to do the work and it's not always fun.
Oh yeah.
But if it truly feels like it's not aligning with you or your therapist doesn't feel like a good fit or whatever it may be, give yourself full permission to change it up. Give yourself full and absolute permission to change it up, to do your own thing, find what brings you joy. This healing journey shouldn't be like sitting down and doing homework where it's all inner child work. Get out, play, move your body. Work that trauma out, dance, shake. I mean, I have a trampoline in my office. You can kind of see it right there.
Yep.
That's one of my ways that I can play for a little bit in the day. I can connect with my inner child. I can move my lymphatic system. I can move stuff throughout my body, let go of the stigma and play around in life with what works. Give yourself permission to, get an oracle card reading or go to a salt healing session or have a Reiki session because
a sound bath, life-changing.
Yes. Any one of those things could be a life-changing modality for you. And if it's not, don't stop.
Yeah.
Don't stop. Keep trying new stuff because you will find something that clicks. You will find something you're obsessed through. I mean, you hear these stories about people who, some addicts go to treatment and they need treatment. That's what's very successful for them. Others go to treatment and relapse. Others literally just make a decision
Mm-hmm.
they're never going to use again. And that works for them. No, I'm not saying like treatment's bad or here nor there. This is not anything to do with addiction therapy to anyone listening to this, but give yourself permission to find what works for you. Give yourself permission to be honest with yourself and do what brings you joy. Because these last few years since 2019, I mean, holy crap, yesterday was the 3-year anniversary.
Wow.
It's been 3 years
Wow.
since I got sick. The biggest thing these last 3 years is like, yeah, it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun getting to know myself, coming up with what I enjoy, recreating my life and giving myself permission to do whatever I want to do, whether it's controversial or not. And there's a very small list of whose opinion matters in my life. And it took a long time to get to that place. But yeah, you just got to start and don't stop and give yourself permission to change it up.
Yep.
One of the biggest things, had I learned this earlier in my healing journey, I think my healing journey would have been a lot different. It's this exercise where you take a piece of paper and on both sides, you write down something. On side one, it's the way you talk to yourself, what you think about yourself. On the other side, it's that exact same scenario. If a friend came to you or a family member, or even maybe like your daughter or your sister, somebody close to you, what would you tell them? Very eye-opening, very, very eye-opening to go through that and to actually see the differences. And that is what made me realize I've got some work to do, but it can be an enjoyable ride. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a bad one, because everything you need is right there inside of you already. You already have the good. You just need to start learning to love yourself and direct it into the right place.
And if you're not at the point of loving yourself yet, thing that really helped me was acting, doing the things you would say and the actions as if you loved, like you were doing it for someone you loved, even if you didn't love yourself yet. Because eventually you do.
It's essentially mothering yourself. It's essentially reparenting yourself. And I had to go through a lot of that. I had a lot of abandonment trauma and connection issues from, I mean, my father almost died in front of me as a 2-year-old. There was a lot that came with that. And yeah, it was,
exactly. And so I think by choosing you, doing all of the, it goes back down to the authenticity piece and the connection and all the things. And, you know, I hope that this conversation has been eye-opening for people. I know for me, I mean, we relate in so many ways with our stories. And I think even in the way that we like totally shifted in life too, which I appreciate. The same thing when you show up as your authentic self, what happens? The universe brings the people that align. It's just, anyways. All right. Enough of my woo-woo. Beth, how can people get in touch with you?
I am on Instagram. You can find me at Beth S. Deeren is one of the places I'm probably most prominent. I will also give Taylor my contact information as well to put in the show notes, should anyone want to reach out and contact me through my practice.
Perfect. All right. Well, I love it. Thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation today.
Thank you for having me. It has been an absolute blessing to be here and an absolute blessing to connect with you and have the opportunity to share my story to anyone listening to this. It gets better. It truly does get better. I promise. I wish I could hug each and every one of you and tell you that you're going to come out on the other side, because I thought I wouldn't. And here I am now. And you just got to give yourself permission to start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everyone, we're going to sign off for today. Thank you so much for listening. And again, thank you, Beth, and we'll see you all next time.